Should I start learning about fashion by focusing on the history aspect of it? So, I mean, I started learning about fashion by focusing on the history aspect of it. But the thing is that I'm a big advocate of learning about fashion that you're interested in rather than thinking you need to follow a specific direction or path in fashion. I think there's more longevity in you doing what you actually enjoy rather than someone telling you the optimum way to learn about fashion is like this way and that way. You know what I mean? So I'm more a person that gives tips and tricks, but I also say that, what do you like the most when you learn about fashion? What interests you? Is it learning about designers? Is it learning about history? I think the best way to learn about fashion is just to start with what you find the most interesting. That's the best advice I can give, to be honest. You ain't getting money, brother. Ew, what's that? Thank you so much for the donation, Janice. Why do you think fashion mags are failing? I'm hoping to bring the experiences of a magazine online and would love your thoughts. Oh, that's a really good question. So I think, first of all, a lot of magazines don't really have anything interesting to say. And it's harder to sell a magazine when people can just read information online. So if there's nothing remotely interesting and your magazine isn't being backed by a massive company like Condé Nast, then you have no chance, really. It's not really going to last too long. And I also think that people try to scale their magazines too big. Like me personally, I have a magazine and I'm in no rush to, even though I think the first issue came out 3 or 4 years ago, I'm in no rush to make the next issue because I just want to really properly have something to say and have the resources to do it the right way. I think people rush it too much. People are like, yeah, we're going to push out an issue every 2 months, and it's like not sustainable. And then it starts to become really crappy. The imagery is really lackluster. So I think that's a big reason why magazines are failing. And then secondly, there just isn't really money in magazines like there was. There was a time when majority of advertisement spend was going towards magazines, like especially print magazines. Whereas nowadays, that spend is being shared between influencers and other content creators and, like magazines, and it's going all over the place. TikTokers, YouTubers, Instagrammers. So there's less of a pot available just for magazine marketing. So the money in it is less also. I still think that you can be successful doing a magazine. You just have to have a very modern way of doing your magazine. It has to be like an online version of it. It can't just all be print, and it's good that you're going for an online version. So I think, yeah, those are all the reasons why magazines don't really work. It's a mixture of there being less money and also the magazines actually not being that good. I remember when I first got into fashion, I learned about, not immediately, the first fashion magazine I ever read was definitely ID magazine. And that's why in my early fashion videos, you see like loads of ID magazines behind me if you go and watch like some of my first videos. But I started to learn about just different magazines. I got into magazines like Old Harper's Bazaar, The Face magazine, and it was so interesting. Like if you read The Face magazine, like in the 80s and the 90s, you learn about writers like Hanif Kureishi. And Hanif Kureishi wrote like the Pop Fable book, or like, he used to write about the Bromley contingent and stuff like that. You learn about the Bromley contingent. You learn about the punk movement and the Sex Pistols. Like, it was so interesting. And I felt like when I used to read magazines then, I really got like a wealth of knowledge. Whereas these days, magazines, I'm reading interviews with Kim Kardashian, and I hate to bring up Kim Kardashian all the time, but she's just the constant victim. But it's more because I don't find anything about Kim Kardashian interesting. So them constantly pushing her in magazines, it doesn't help because there's not many interesting things you can really say, right? And like pushing all these like things. And also when I used to read these magazines, there were adverts, but half of the magazine, they weren't adverts. Nowadays, you read a magazine, half of the book is adverts. And it's like, so did I pay for a catalogue of adverts for luxury brands, or did I pay for a fashion magazine? Like, which one did I do? So it's just the landscape is different. I think a lot of these magazines these days are so uninspired, which is why I was so excited when I read Beyond Noise. Because Beyond Noise, and for guys that don't know, if you're new or whatever, Beyond Noise has quickly become one of my favorite new fashion magazines. I think I'm not sure. Okay, so they have two issues now. So they just recently released their second issue, but this is the Instagram for Beyond Noise. But I absolutely love this magazine. I think it's so good. It's such a good magazine. It literally reminds me of the kind of magazine that I used to read when I first got into fashion. Like, I hope that the kids getting into fashion now find magazines like Beyond Noise and read Beyond Noise. I feel like that would get them, that would make them have the same passion that I did for fashion when I was younger. People don't like reading anymore. That's also part of it too. That's a good point in terms of the death of magazines in a sense. Can we bring back the educated consumer post social media? It's really hard to do that. I think because of how mainstream fashion is. Before, fashion was so niche that, and I think it's actually a good thing that more people are into fashion. But I think the drawback is that I guess people in general are less educated about fashion, because fashion, and when I say fashion, not fashion as a whole, everyone used to wear clothes, but high fashion, like runway fashion, like fashion as an art form, that kind of perspective on fashion was very, very niche. And so the kind of people that were into that, you kind of had to be knowledgeable, because you, like, how else would you be into it when it's so niche? So that's why it feels like, you know, older consumers, people that got into fashion in the, like, before the massive social media burst of fashion, they tend to be more educated than like the new generation. And that's not to say that people in the new generation aren't educated. This is more on average. But I don't think it's necessarily their fault, because it's no longer niche. So the barrier to entry is really low, very, very low. So just is what it is. And then also everyone's a designer now, so that's also another thing. Let's see. It's all about influencers now. Also, sometimes magazines sell out too easily to advertisers, and the content just becomes watered down. Yeah. This is also a good point. There's not enough menswear focused fashion magazines. This is very true. That's very true. I think because culturally, less people are interested in menswear as like a serious form of study, or like a serious form of something to, you know, make magazines about and stuff. Relying on screens for fashion and design seems both unhealthy and a weird way to represent visuals. Like, are we all looking at the same Pantone color of the year if our screen settings are different? That's a good point, actually. I have an issue with I find it really hard to concentrate on a screen. I don't know if that's like there's something wrong with me. So I have to read things physically. That's why people buy, like, you know, people have like audiobooks, or people buy ebooks, and it works for them. But for me, I buy, if like something is not available other than an ebook, then I'll buy the ebook and then I'll print it so I can read it physically. I can't read it on a screen. And then if there's like a physical book version of the thing, I'm always going to get the physical version so I can actually like read pages rather than look at a screen. I can concentrate better. And I think also, because I create content and I get like loads of emails, requests, and like messages. So I think when I'm trying to read stuff on my screen, there's just things popping up on my screen all the time. It's so distracting. A message from here, Instagram notification. It's a bit all over the place. So I feel like I can settle and just focus in when it's just text. And that's why I have like even my personal library and stuff. That's a big reason why. Let's see. If the information had been spread just as fast as the interest in being fashionable and popular, the quality downfall wouldn't be so drastic. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's such a good point also. Because when I first got into fashion, which obviously I was born, let me not say in the social media age, but I grew up in the social media. I remember people started using Facebook when I was in primary school, just about to go into secondary school, and I was like 9-10 years old. So I wasn't born into it, but I kind of grew up with it slightly. But I feel like the early time when I first got into fashion, like social media wasn't big. It was more like Tumblr days when I really started getting into fashion. And things happened so slowly. I feel like fashion news was so slow. Like, you had so much time to take in fashion news. Like, something would happen and you would read what Susie Menkes has to say. You would read what Tim Blanks had to say. You would, you know, later on you would watch the style.com review on style.com on their website. it was so slow. Like you could just take in all the information. And I feel like now the pace is insane. Like I stream, obviously next year, my New Year's resolution is to stream more consistently, but I feel like I stream semi-consistently now. And every few days, there's already like a new what's trending in fashion. Like it doesn't stop. It doesn't end. It doesn't slow down. So I think that's also something that's hindering people, I guess, in terms of understanding, because it's so fast. People just read headlines and think that they know about things because they read a headline. They didn't read any articles. They didn't seek any of the information. They're not in forums where they're discussing these things. So yeah, I do think that the pace of the way that fashion information is proliferated is really out of hand, actually. Do you have a current idea for your next mega shoot? Yeah, I literally have all the... Let me see if I can show you on my phone. I have all my ideas for my magazine. It's just that it's more of like a timing thing. I just feel like there needs to be like a timing. So my first idea, and by the way, if you guys want to copy my idea, it's fine, because you're never going to do it like me. So I don't have an issue telling people my ideas. But my idea has always been to do like 2 magazines a year. When I do relaunch it, it'll be 2 magazines a year. So 1 like issue and 1 location-based issue. So what that looks like is I've already launched issue 1. So the next magazine will be issue 2. And then there'll be like a New York issue where the whole magazine is going to like creative communities in New York, designers in New York, journalists in New York, photographers in New York, like just focused on New York. But it won't be New York because New York is like too obvious. It'll be something like the fashion archive. Where's an area that's interesting but hasn't been covered? Like I still want to do like the fashion archive Istanbul. That's one that I really want to do. So like the fashion archive Istanbul edition, location-based issue, where I go to Istanbul for like a month and interview people and do photo shoots there and really uncover the creative scene through the magazine. That's the idea I have. And then for the issue itself, it's more like creators and designers I find interesting. I compile that into that issue, and I have literally 30 article ideas for the next magazine. So I think it's more of like a just the right timing sort of thing. But if I wanted to start on the magazine today, I could. I just think the timing isn't right. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.